They built a sled that everyone copied. They had 40+% of the entire snowmobile market. They had the sled snowmobile magazine called the snowmobile of the decade. But somewhere between that legacy and right now, something broke. Not just an engine, something deeper. You're not watching this because Polaris had a bad year. You're watching this because the brand that built the Indy has been sending stop ride notices for 3 straight seasons. And if you own one right now, you need to know which machines are affected and exactly why this keeps happening. By the end of this, you'll know exactly how Polaris built the most dominant sled in the history of the sport. You'll find out what actually happened inside the Dragon 800 and why switching away took 5 full model years. You'll get the real numbers from the recall years. And I mean all of them, not just the ones that made the press release. And I'll give you a straight answer on what you should actually do if you're thinking about buying used Polaris right now. Stay with me. Roseau, Minnesota, 1955. Edgar Hetton and his brother Alan and their buddy David Johnson are building farm equipment. They're not trying to change winter sports. They're trying to cross frozen ground. Edgar drops out of the company in 1960 after a disagreement. He walks away and eventually builds what becomes Arctic Cat. But the guys he left behind in Roseau, they stay with it. And what they build over the next 25 years becomes the Indy. This is my opinion, but Indy wasn't just a good sled. It was an engineering philosophy. In the mid-1970s, the Polaris race team started experimenting with independent front suspension on oval race sleds. Don Omdahl was the first Polaris racer to pilot one in a race, a modest 250 cubic centimeter prototype. He didn't even win. But the data from that sled changed everything. By December 1976, the Midnight Blue Express factory race team was on RXL models with IFS. By 1977 and 1978, they were dominating the oval racing scene on those same sleds. By 1979, IFS went into cross-country racing. By 1980, it hit production. The 1980 TX Indy, that's the one. And if you rode it after anything else that existed at the time, you understood immediately why it mattered. You could stay on the gas through terrain that would have bucked you off a leaf spring sled. The front end managed the bump instead of transmitting it directly into your hands. 6 inches of travel, and at the time it felt like riding a different vehicle entirely. SnowTech magazine has said flat out that the 1980 Polaris TXL Indy and the 2003 Ski-Doo Rev are probably the 2 most influential and game-changing snowmobiles ever introduced. That's the company Polaris used to be. We all know the Indy platform dominated. In 1981, the Centurion Indy 500 won the first ever snowgoer shootout of high-performance snowmobiles. That's the most respected head-to-head comparison test in the industry. They won it in the debut year. By 1989, Snowmobile magazine named the Polaris Indy 500 the snowmobile of the decade. And the Indy 500 Twin introduced that same year? Dealers literally could not keep it in stock. Snow Week magazine in December 1988 reported that dealers just laughed when you asked if they had any left. For 1990, dealer orders were cut by 20% because Polaris couldn't build them fast enough. Despite a $200 price increase, didn't matter. People were lining up. And then came the XL-T Triple. Supertrax magazine called it the national anthem of snowmobiling. By the mid-1990s, the XL-T pushed Polaris past 40% market share. 40%. In a sport with 4 manufacturers fighting for every sale, owning 40% of the market is almost unbelievable. Polaris was the brand. Full stop. And this is exactly where the story takes a turn. Because the warning signs were already there. Nobody wanted to see them. Before we get to the Dragon disaster, before the recalls, before all of it, there's something from the 1990s that deserves more attention than it gets. The crankcase bearing tolerances on the XLT era motors had a documented problem. Machine too tight. In some cases, bearing bores measured 0.004 inches too tight from the factory. What does 0.004 inches mean in practice? It means you could lock a PTO bearing in a few hundred miles. The bearing would lock up and the crank would be done. Most Polaris shops at the time didn't figure out it was the crankcase itself that was the issue. They replaced the bearings, the sled ran fine for a while, then came back. Replaced them again. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. The actual fix was honing the bearing saddle out by .001. That was it. Polaris knew. They didn't put a clear service bulletin out to shops. They just kept selling sleds, and the guys with the knowledge to do the fix learned it the hard way. Now you might say that's old news. And it is, yeah. But pay attention to the pattern here. Known issue, internal knowledge, not communicated. Customers absorb the cost. Hold that thought, because it comes back, and the next time it comes back a lot harder. Quick pause. If this is already getting your blood moving, hit that like button. Helps the channel more than you know. 2008, Polaris launches the Dragon 800 CFI. New engine, new era. The marketing was all confidence. This was supposed to be the performance answer to the Ski-Doo 800 E-Tech that was eating Polaris's lunch in the mountain and performance segment. What actually shipped to customers was embarrassing. First problem, single-ring pistons. The 2008 and 2009 engines used a piston design where the ring could not dissipate heat fast enough, especially at part throttle, which is where most trail riding happens. Second problem, the EFI fuel map was lean in the mid-range. Not a little lean, dangerously lean. If you held the throttle steady at around 6,000 revolutions per minute, you could burn down the engine without the detonation sensor even triggering. The sensor that was supposed to protect the engine missed the exact scenario most likely to destroy it. Third problem, the oil pump was under-delivering from day one. Guys were reporting that their brand new sleds barely registered oil consumption. The pump wasn't moving enough lubricant to the places that needed it most. And fourth, the voltage regulator was a known failure point, and when it went, it could take the ECU with it. One part fails in the field, and suddenly your sled is a 400-pound sled-shaped object in the middle of nowhere. Polaris issued a recall. New pistons, new cylinders, updated fuel map. The recall covered the 2008 and 2009 models. People gave this model a nickname. You don't drive a Dragon out, you drag it out. Now here's the specific detail that explains why the fixes kept not fixing it, and I want you guys to focus on it. From 2008 through 2012, every single year, the 800 CFI engine used a crankshaft manufactured by a company called MAPE. That MAPE crank had a documented high failure rate in the lower rod bearing and outer bearings. Polaris thickened the cylinder skirt in 2010. They thickened it again for 2011 and 2012. But they kept the same problematic MAPE crank in every engine through that entire stretch. The real fix finally came in 2013. Polaris switched crank suppliers back to Fuji. Thicker cylinders, better pistons. The 2013 motor was genuinely a different machine, but that was 5 full model years after the Dragon launched. Polaris never publicly acknowledged that the crank supplier was at the center of it. Arctic Cat and Ski-Doo picked up customers during those seasons that they never gave back. Let me give you the scale of what happened next. Because what you saw, the Dragon era, was just bad. The 2020s turned it into worse. The Axis platform, which covered model years 2015 through 2022, got hit with a fuel hose recall in 2020. Improperly secured fuel lines. Polaris acknowledged 13 reports of lines coming loose. Approximately 57,300 units affected globally, 41,200 in the US, 16,100 in Canada. But wait, we're just getting started here, guys. In 2022 and 2023, the fire hazard recall hit. This one covered model years 2013 through 2023, spanning the ProRide, Axis chess, and early Matrix platforms. The issue was electrostatic discharge inside the fuel tank, which could ignite degraded fuel during long storage. 30 cases of fuel tank ruptures, 16 fires, 1 reported injury, approximately 230,000 units affected globally. My gosh, 230,000 snowmobiles with a potential fire hazard. Then came the clutch recalls. Polaris issues a stop sale, stop ride notice affecting Matrix chassis machines from model years 2022 through 2025 with Patriot 650 and Patriot 850 engines. The primary drive clutch could crack at the post, separate from the sled entirely, and become a projectile. They expanded that recall in January 2024, expanded it again in February 2024, expanded it a fourth time in May 2025. Yes. By the fourth expansion, 21,160 matrix units from 4 consecutive model years were affected. Some owners who already had their clutch replaced under the first recall had to bring the sled back in because the replacement part was also affected. It's embarrassing. Polaris replaced your clutch, then recalled the replacement. Across those 3 clutch-related stop rides from 2023, they tracked 233 reported failures across approximately 30,000 affected units. The failure rate on paper looks under 1%, but 1% of your clutch flying off at speed isn't an acceptable failure rate, and Polaris's own dealers were saying so publicly. Drop a comment below if you've personally dealt with any of these recalls. Genuinely curious how many of you got caught in this. Let me ask another honest question that matters. Is this an engineering company that keeps getting unlucky? Or is this a quality control culture that keeps making the same choices? Look at what Snowgoer published in March 2024. Polaris's own snowmobile product manager, Nels Indy, stood in front of press and said they are committed to quality, not just fixing things that are breaking, but getting out ahead of them. For model year 2025, Polaris released a public list of 25 specific quality updates. 25 in a single model year. Self-loosening clutches, disappearing high-facts, seeping oil bottles, calibration failures. Come on, you don't put out a list of 25 fixes unless you know the last few years have been bad. And you don't put out that list publicly unless you're trying to manage a loyalty problem that's showing up in the sales numbers. Polaris also held back Dynamix electronic shocks, originally planned for model year 2024, because they wanted more validation time. That's actually a good call. But it also means the original plan was to release something before it was ready. Again, the deeper issue isn't one engine or one clutch design. The deeper issue is a company that expanded to cover ATVs, motorcycles, boats, and defense vehicles, while trying to keep its snowmobile quality at the standard the sport was built on. When your product line spans that wide and your supply chains went sideways in 2020, something has to give. And for the last several years, it's been the sleds. All right, if you're shopping used right now, here's the honest buy window. The Polaris Liberty 600 Twin, running from roughly 1998 through the mid-2000s in various chassis configurations, is one of the most durable 600 cubic centimeter two-stroke engines Polaris ever made. Clean examples with the Edge chassis from 2002 through 2005 are worth serious attention. I mean, they're serviceable, parts are still available, and the engine has a reputation the Dragon 800 will never have. For anyone looking at the 800 platform, please avoid 2008 through 2012. That's the entire MAPE crank era, and even the units that didn't fail outright usually needed work earlier than they should have. The 2013 and later Pro 800, with the Fuji crank and thicker cylinders, is a different machine. Still check compression before you buy anything over 2,500 miles, but you're not rolling the dice the same way. The 2016 through 2020 Axwis 800 also has a solid track record. For the current Matrix platform, check your VIN before you buy anything from the 2022 through 2025 range. Go to polaris.com/en-us/off-road-recalls and enter the VIN, not after you buy it. Before. If it has an open recall, get written confirmation from the dealer that the repair is complete and that the replacement part itself is not on a subsequent recall notice. That last point matters. Some owners who got the first clutch fix were pulled back in again when Polaris found the cracking issue in the replacement clutch. If you currently own a Matrix with a Patriot 650 or 850 and haven't had the recall work done, call your dealer. Don't ride it first. The failure mode here isn't gradual degradation, it's a clutch component separating while you're moving. That's not a risk worth taking for one more ride. If you've owned a Polaris, good experience or nightmare, drop it in the comments. I read everyone. If this video saved you from a bad buy or just finally put words to something you already felt, hit the like button. If this is the kind of honest content you're looking for, hit subscribe. Small channel. Every single subscriber matters to me. Check out the next video right here.